for this matchup. Out of all of them. Maybe
This
he
is
has
gonna give
something
so many
less
options
on
to Soul.
Yeah, it's just like having the platforms there for Lance is good because you just get to reset your jumps and play that aerial down air game with the drifting you want to play. But Phazon is in another class of Soul, so he gets triple downlight to open up the game.
Yeah, and the floating platform utility there for the downlight was so good to help reset and extend that combo that normally would only end in round 2 or 3. But Soul, having that spacing back once again, trying to utilize the floating platforms to evade Phazon. The Phazon's going in deep once more. The lower end of the stage. Soul swaps off away from the Lance, tries to find the confirmation weapon off of that Axe. And we've seen how Axe can be on the Zoe from Stingray. But Phazon gonna be much more, again, in their face than what Luna had brought out. Luna like to be a little bit more spacious, but the zoning is not going to be an option.
This is what scared me about this matchup, right? I talked about it. That's not going to KO just yet. Our side. With Hattori, it's like, yeah, you have that low defense and you have low damaging weapons, but you can get a lot of hits in. Phazon got a lot of hits in there, and it did not take Soul very long to not only match those hits, but to surpass it, because now Phazon is the one in the deep red. I'm going to make it the other side. But Phazon's the one in the deep red here, and at this point, Axe and Light or Downlight will probably knock him out.
Yeah, literally
come out to hit neutral. And when it came to Impala, Impala has high defense as well, but Impala does not have that high force. So while Impala has to take more hits, he's also just not doing too much with his. Ulgrim is a completely different story. We're seeing high force, high damaging weapons mixed with high defense. Phazon's gonna have to work hard for these stocks.
Phazon did confirm that first stock though. It's all about just chipping away that damage against Soul, so stock number 2 should be, in theory, a little bit easier for Phazon when they inevitably go down to that second stock. Again, a single hit from Soul right now should turn things into an even stock count. It's just a matter of when. Soul's giving a lot of agency over to Phazon, but finally catches them out. A great way, middle of the stage, great neutral play. Does take Phazon down to that second stock. It's a matter now of seeing unarmed Phazon. Can they find much? They do get that sword back into the disposal. So, looking for a prime point of entry, does find at least one, and now keeping Phazon in a bit of a loop. Soul wasn't able to find it the third time around. Gonna enable themselves to use that floating platform to get a little bit higher elevation than normal. Soul, still waiting for the prime point to get that damage back. The neutral sig didn't connect from Phazon's sword whatsoever. This ledge guard wasn't working out with signatures, but even against the Lance, Phazon's able to send Soul deep down to the blast zone, but no chance of recovery, delayed by the sword. Sends them down to their final stock.
Very nice place, very well placed weapon throw there to close off that stock. And now we're kind of in the situation with the first stock where we saw where now Soul has to figure out a way to get this knockout. It looks like it's coming easier for him than it did in the first one.
Yeah.
Is Phazon going to be able to tack on any extra damage? Another endler like that might just be the end of his story. Sider's barely going to miss.
Just like stock number 1. A single hit should be good to take down Phazon. Phazon's playing at least a little bit patient, really just trying to fish out Soul, keep them on their toes, moving around a lot more, wearing them down for game number 1. And this Lance has not really found a lot of impact, especially in these later stocks. Floating platforms, though, nearly sending Soul above so early in their final stock for game 1. That could have been it if we had seen just a little bit more damage before the start of that combo. But Soul has to go back to the tried and true, brings out that Axe, Neutral Light sends Phazon down to this final stock, and now the Weapon Star is going to be so important. But Remy, what we're seeing that Lance come underway, I want to see Soul bring out the Axe more.
Yeah, it feels like the Axe is really what's getting a lot of this damage up. But as we say that, he's going to get the 3-piece on the Lance there with the side air to add on even more damage. And Phazon is actually reminding us about why he chose this map when he's getting the triple downlights and practicing for the double on the right side immediately after. It's going to send Soul into the orange from the last stock, but Soul is doing a really good job, as we're seeing, of just evening up the damage immediately. Where Soul lacks is when he has to get these knockouts.
Absolutely. And Soul is being really good with the footwork right now. We're seeing Phazon try to go for these quick pivots. A lot of neutral sigs haven't connected. Soul's really being patient, being so calculated about where the damage should be applied. And there it is! What a turnaround! Soul down sig with the Axe, sending Phazon away. And, you know, we talked about how there's a lot of lack of KO potential coming out from Soul. But towards the end, when Soul started playing more unpredictable and catching out Phazon's movement where he would land, that's where I think we really started to see this Ulgrim pick shine.
Pretty good damage split too from his weapons there, both doing over 300 with the Lance taking the higher end of it due to that last stock we saw. The down stick is going to confirm that KO, and this time we're going to go over to the Miami Dome. That is going to kind of screw up with the triple down line game we saw, but in Soul's point of view, this is still going to be good for him. The platforms are going to be there to reset, but that dodge in is caught. Phazon doesn't time it correctly, and he does have his dodge back in time.
Yeah, again, the return of the floating platforms too. We were kind of questioning the floating platforms on Small Enigma going into that first game, but it seemed like Phazon, at least with the spear, was finding a lot of value keeping Soul in the air just off of the floating platforms alone.
He did ban the same exact way, so it looked like Phazon was willing to go back to Enigma. Soul was the one that opted out to bring it to Miami Dome. That way he could keep the same platforms as you saw there, playing around that platform there, staying in the air for that side air, but he doesn't have to worry about the triple down lights anymore. So it's actually a really good option from Soul to ban to this map rather than the Enigma.
No, I agree. Smaller blast zones too are going to be much more beneficial. We've already seen Phazon lose that first stock. Lance returns though. Sword back underway for Phazon. Loves to fish out those side airs off of a punish from Soul. We see it again. Soul off stage though. Not a lot of impact has been found from Soul playing in the off stage exclusively in this set. Phazon still being very careful. Axe and Lance off stage is not something you want to toy with and mess around with too haphazardly. But this ledge guard's good. Neutral light comes out, sends Soul back off the stage. The sweat beads are out, but Soul is able to return on forwards, but the spacing's there for Phazon to capitalize on that first stock, and for all intents and purposes, it's back to an even game.
Now, Phazon was kind of behind in that stock, so he did an okay job of evening it up towards the tail end there. He didn't take too much more damage, and now he's the one finding the majority of these hits, but it's just so scary. You can see how many hits he's found in a row there, and Soul is only entering the deep orange. That's the side effect of playing a Tori. That's where the weak points come in, and the clash there is not going to be good for him either. Now another sidelight misses the nair, but Phazon has still entered that red part. Now the knockouts are going to start looking out. You're going to start seeing the down six, the falling side airs. But Phazon answers back quick with an end light into the end sig. Tries to go aggressive for the edge guard, and it's a little too aggressive. It's not going to come out correct.
I mean, I guess you could argue that Phazon was already so deep red on that second stock that you might as well try to go for one of those overextension plays off stage, but it really feels like, at least in our casting block, we've been seeing Phazon try to go for these off-stage plays, and they've been punished so heavily.
Yeah, I think Phazon, and from talking to him, he wants to play in this way where it's, like, correct, right?
Yeah.
All things considered, like, the aggressive edge guard there is the correct play. The inputs weren't there for it, but that's just part of it, right? We have to practice and keep it up. As we say that, though, Soul, his inputs are on point. The recovery comes out in the center of the map, and Phazon is sent absolutely flying. The lock-ins were fast. It's a legend swap. The Akuma is going to come out, trade in that low defense for higher defense, and trade in those maps for something a bit flatter, a bit more stable in the apocalypse.
Ooh, I like this play. I think having a little bit more defense in the arsenal of Phazon is going to be a big benefit. But also, against the Lance, I feel like the Gauntlets might be good to catch out some of these kind of side airs with a down air of their own. But also, the big winning factor for Soul, at least in the early stocks, has been that Axe. Having a little bit more velocity and firepower with those Gauntlets, I think will be a huge benefit. Just keep Soul off of a linear path in terms of their movement. And we're seeing that right away. Grounded play from Phazon was finding a lot of early damage. Soul returns out with the Axe. This engagement is going to be the litmus test to see how well the Gauntlets can fare for possibly the rest of this series.
Right now, they're just feeling each other out. Soul knows that this is a completely different matchup than what he's been dealing with. Every single whiff is going to probably get punished because of the starter frames of Gauntlets, and you're not going to really get too much opportunity. He's on with an aggressive side sig. The Lance side is going to call it out, though, and the weapon throw into down there is going to tag on even more damage for him. But you can already see how much more even the trades are compared to Tori here, as Soul enters the red, and Phazon is only in the orange off the trading, it's about the same hits as we saw from the previous games, right? From Tori's sword, he was basically hitting him the same amount of times. Soul was going to get the better end of this last string of trades here with Nair into recovery, but for the most part, Phazon is on better footing than we were seeing before. Nice punish from Soul, and he's been on that. I have to give him to him when he's due. His punishes are perfect. Another punish on that end stick there is gonna send Phazon flying, and now Phazon entering that barbecue hot red. The end light comes out, and that's gonna do it at that HP.
See, I'm glad you mentioned that because I feel like with a lot of Lance players, especially in that final end of the stock, we'd see that recovery come through, and that would have been a perfect opportunity for someone like Phazon to go for a punish. Soul is playing this so safe right now. Safe, but aggressive, to the point where they don't want to give anything away for Phazon to go in for an early punish. Soul has this stock to work with now. Deep, deep red. Playing again safe to rack up that damage and keep Phazon on his toes. He throws away the gauntlets though. Accidentally, possibly, weapon starves himself. Soul goes back to that lance, but no. The unarmed on Val, so comfortable for Phazon. Almost turns the tides once more to an even game. But again, I want to see what these gauntlets can bring out here. The Nair doesn't connect, and Soul has the ability to bring out that axe. And there we go. Spacing's out. Recovery doesn't connect. But look at this. Miss hits everywhere.
Now Soul with some whiffs here for himself, and Phazon gets that dodge read. Can't do too much with it, but the whiffs from Soul, he needs to start landing these attacks. We're seeing too many whiffs come out, and Phazon is punishing every single one of them, as is his right with these gauntlets. He is catching the landings, the placement is there, and the Nair is going to be the only answer from Soul. There, Soul lands the punish, and I'm mentioning it, he is good with his punishes. If Phazon whiffs in front of him, Soul will be there to punish, and that Nair gets whiffed, gets punished. The weapon throw is not there, but the edge guard is still in fashion. He's still looking for it. He's going to opt out to go back to the stage and get the glance.
Yeah, and Phazon, at this point, unafraid to go unarmed, has been finding a lot of value getting up close and personal. But like you said, good contact from Soul brings things again to where we've been seeing the majority of this set. A strong, considerable lead for Soul, having a stock ahead. The gauntlets, though, good to reset neutral, a tiny bit more. Soul's forced to respect it a lot more than we've seen, at least when the spear was brought out. But even then, Soul's game has been almost entirely from punishes. Not once, but twice, the Nairs go underway, and Phazon's forced to relegate away the gauntlets and go unarmed for the sword.
Unless there's going to send Soul flying, but it's not going to knock out just yet. The weapon throw to guarantee his safety as he comes back to this map. A charged N-Sig is not going to be at Phazon. Like there, but the Sarah can't be found. And at this point, he's grasping at straws, trying to find this knockout, and Soul gives it to him just off of the edge of that platform play.
Phazon has to play this final stock perfectly. If we keep seeing traded damage through like we have been for the rest of this set, then Soul is likely to win. Phazon can't be afraid either. Has to play perfectly here, keeping Soul on the ledge of the stage. But no, Cider has kept Phazon at bay, conditioning him to falter towards the right side of that blast zone over and over again. But no, the lance is now thrown away. Axe is returning once more, trying to go for these haphazard swings, and Phazon's there for the preemptive punish.
Phazon opting to play this aggressively rather than slowly. He's just constantly in Soul's zone, constantly tagging on these slide attacks. Nice grounded ground pound, but there's the one hit we were worried about. Now that hit could be a momentum shifter, because now you're worried. You got your one hit that you were allowed to eat, right? But now if you eat another one, it could be the game for you. Work out side light, goes for the Sarah read, doesn't find the down sig, doesn't find that either. Phazon now going on the aggressive, finds the down air. Soul once again, now he's looking for the side airs. You can just see him gesturing forward for it. Oh! That's gonna be a side air throw now. Not gonna find more.
This is
looking
so
for
tricky.
Another one, you can tell, jump side air. Not gonna find it just yet. Phazon playing patiently, and that's where the experience gap comes in. He knows the knockout options are just side air, and he does not get tagged by a single one of them. Look at the damage trade.
Oh my, and I'm glad he mentioned the experience dip there, because it definitely did feel like nerves were starting to come out a little bit towards the end of that set, with Soul struggling to close out that final stock against Phazon. And I gotta say, Phazon recognized the fact that Soul loves to go for those side airs, regardless of the weapon that he's on, to finish out those stocks. And with Phazon looking to find that offstage play, and Soul essentially being afraid to even contest gauntlets off stage, it left him with so limited options for that final engagement that Phazon seemingly had full control at the very end.
Yeah, Phazon definitely called him out on that last stock, and you mentioned how he had to play it perfectly. He played it as well as he could. He could only afford a couple hits towards the end there, and look at the graph. You can see where the damage completely stops being taken from Phazon towards that tail end, and the truth is, if he took any more, if he got hit by anything relatively strong, the game would have ended. So seeing as he was able to just stop taking the damage there, stop getting it completely, and find that down air recovery off the platform again, that's the experience gap I'm talking about. That's the patience and knowledge that you need to get wins like that. And we're going right back to Apocalypse, so he's going to have the same chance to play that game out.
Yeah, I really want to see what Apocalypse can bring out from Seoul this time around. I mean, even on stages where we saw the floaty platforms, we saw Miami, we saw Enigma, a lot of those did also benefit Seoul, maybe to a lesser extent than Phazon, but there were still a lot of good chances to reset out of what Phazon's combo strings were starting to employ. Now, granted, that was a lot on the spear play, and we haven't seen floating platforms have as big dominance when it came to Apocalypse, but Seoul could still use that for reset potential here and keep Phazon at bay, especially starting off with all these down airs. Good start though. Attempted side sig from Phazon, doesn't quite work out though, but it keeps Seoul at the bottom towards the blast zone. Sweat beads are out. Seoul with the spot dodge, tries to reset and bait out Phazon to play over aggressive to get that weapon back. It ends up working. And now Phazon with the weapon throw extends that range just a tiny bit more into the recovery and plays Seoul like a fiddle. This is a very different Akuma from what we saw stock 1 of last game.
That's just the effect that comes onto a player when they're at that game point, they're about to lose, and they manage to bring it back. The next games that you're going to watch from there is a completely different player, as we're seeing Phazon just completely slow it down and dissect this game in its entirety. That's a dodge read, and earlier we saw another dodge read of the sword. That's why I was so dumbfounded watching. I was just like watching it, and I'm like, yeah, this isn't even the same person I've been watching, so now I have to cast someone else all of a sudden, right? So he dodges that weapon throw, and the side stick is going to barely miss. But he's already lapped him in damage. This is more of what we expected from such a matchup, right? From a PR gap this big. And Phazon is finally bringing it out, abusing the bad habits of Seoul, knowing that, okay, this guy wants the weapon throw to land on the ground. This guy wants to only go for these specific moves. He wants to go for these punishes. And he's calling him out for most of them at this point.
I'm glad that you mentioned that too, because Seoul is not given any options at all. Recovery does able to catch out Phazon though. Damage may have already been done, quite literally. Seoul was so heavily lit up on this second stock, and Seoul was only really looking for those siders at the end of the stock for Phazon. And like you mentioned, great read, side sig is out. Phazon with a full stock lead is reading these punishes by Seoul like a book.
Now he has the gauntlets again versus the Axe. Seoul on his last stock here on this one, so sideline Nair is going to be what he goes for. He's just trying to tag in damage, and that's all he can go for. But Phazon, he's still playing aggressively, going for these reads, trying to see if he can get anything special off stage. But Seoul's kind of a safe player. He's just going to default to back to the map. He wants to trade sides. It's fine for this Apocalypse, right?
And Phazon's being extra careful with these ledges too, just in case. Doesn't want to squander this second stock. Seoul though, like you said, the safety for the off-ledge play. Possibly no weapon throw whatsoever. But, I'm sorry, no signature ledge guard whatsoever. And Seoul's back on that lance again. Nair is out. Chip damage has already been applied, but at this point, Seoul just has to look for a way to confirm this second stock. And oftentimes, we see recoveries or those side airs from Seoul. We haven't really seen a lot of signatures being able to be brought out. Good dare, though, keeping Phazon at bay, racking up that damage, so a singular hit, no matter what the defense that Phazon can bring out has, will just eliminate the second stock, and there it is. And
another side air coming through. That's going to be the option he goes for to get that knockout. And that's really just been the only option he has, right? We've seen him fishing for these side airs the entire time, and that's where Aldrin's weakness comes in. You have 2 horizontal side airs, and for both the weapons, that's the main KO option without getting them into deep red where an end light will knock out. And it's starting to really hurt him as he can't keep the stocks off.
No. And look at these spot dodges from Phazon. They've been so expertly timed because he has the reads about when Seoul wants to go for the punish. Seoul's off stage. Weapon throw doesn't connect. Phazon almost set up for the off stage play unarmed. Unable to find the confirmation though. Goes for the weapon starve instead. Gauntlets are out. Seoul's in a really bad spot. Does not want to contest against those gauntlets. A single ground pound could turn the tides of this entire set. And look at
now you're seeing Seoul opt to play with pure movement here instead of no dodge. And I was about to say exactly why that could be bad. Because of a time like that, where Phazon just calls him out on it, right? With the gauntlets, it's not a good call out because if you go for a gauntlet move, there's no true combo into knockout, and that's gauntlet's weakness, right? You have to get the GC or you have to get that aerial option. But when you have sword, if you're playing purely off your movement with no dodge, and someone downlights you, that's GG. Game's over. He just walks up to him and downlights him at the end there because he knows Seoul's not going to dodge out the way. He's just going to try to raw move out the way, and the downlight's going to knock him out.
Yeah. And the Ulgrim no longer really working out well for Soul. Switches over to the Bryn, maintaining the axe and now bringing out that spear. I think the spear will be great to kind of keep Phazon at bay. We're seeing this over-aggression coming out from the player. Great gravity cancel and light to begin things off. And Soul already having to run away from Phazon in the grounded game. He's trying so hard to find these setups to get anything going with the axe, but Phazon's not letting up at all. Good punish early on though. Phazon immediately retaliates with a down air. Soul is trying to catch out the timing of Phazon to position themselves for the down air, but it's not working out. Phazon now back on that sword. The neutral sig doesn't connect. Soul is just fishing for the placement of Phazon, but he's not budging. Phazon is playing so close to the chest that no matter what Soul is doing, he's just not able to find these neutral lights on the axe.
Phazon running away with the early game, which we've been seeing in most of these sets. And this is an interesting swap up, not because like Bryn is a bad pick here or anything, but just because we've been seeing most of the work be done on the back of the lance, right? We were seeing a couple of axes here and there. Maybe he just wants to play the spear, but doesn't want to bring out Orion or anything. The lance has been doing a lot of the work for him. So seeing him give it up here, focus mainly on spear and axe gameplay. Well, the spear is doing a lot of work right now. It's working pretty well, zoning Phazon off. Phazon not able to find a confirmation for this knockout just yet. Going aggressive with the unarmed, and he wall slips, so he catches him with the end light.
Yeah, and this is where something becomes a snowfall into an avalanche. Soul already down one stock. Only needs a solid signature to possibly bring Phazon down to that second. And like you mentioned, getting zoned out so well. A side air sends Phazon so deep near the blast zone, but it's not enough. Offstage play though. Doesn't want to contest against the gauntlets. The exclamation mark points are out, but again, it doesn't matter much. Catching out with the neutral sig though does send Phazon down, and for all intents and purposes, Remy, this is a pretty good stock so far for Soul. He's been able to even things up against Phazon without taking too much damage away from themselves.
Downlight's gonna connect, and at this point they're just tagging Phazon with one straight hit each time. But it's working because Phazon's not tagging him with anything. Switches back to the sword. An aggressive end light there, but no dodge down for the read there.
Yeah, Phazon at this point isn't even really bringing out spot dodges. He's just maneuvering himself out of the way because he can read where those side airs and dares from Soul will come in from. And a lot of that is coming down from the sword. I think Phazon finding a lot more value out of the gauntlets here, just chasing down Soul. As soon as those gauntlets are brought out, Soul's movement completely changes. He's forced to run away, zone himself out, play near the ledges, and try to bait out whatever kind of signature or aggressive, side air or side light option that he wants to bring out to be for the punish. And even that's not working out well.
Now Soul is at a point where the knockout is there and he could run away with this game, but he just can't seem to find it because the side airs are not going to work. The end light's not connecting. I mean, the end sig's not connecting, and the damage is racking up to the point where it's useless now. Phazon's the one that gets to run over the middle of the map. He disarms himself, picks up the gauntlets, and now he's going to get the sword again, and Soul has to play unarmed.
Yeah, and we saw Phazon find a lot of value unarmed in the last two games, but Soul, not really so much. Has been opting to play almost exclusively for weapons. Yeah, weapon throw doesn't find a whole lot. Soul was brought up into the air. Relatively an even game thus far, though. Phazon has all the power to control this back to a dominant set. Possibly to find it.
The nerves are showing there. He goes for the downlight, but doesn't think he'll hit it. Doesn't have the confidence, so doesn't get the recovery. And now Phazon runs away with that stock that was honestly stolen off the back of Soul's mistake.
Yeah, and Soul playing just a little too safe, and it feels like with the safetiness, we're seeing a lot more mistakes coming underway. Good side air there. No damage applied to Soul at all. And as well, we're at the very end of this set. One stock left. We've been having so many good games today. This is all down for game number 5. Soul has to change things up drastically here. Has to catch out Phazon and fight fire with fire rather than running away and playing for punishes.
They're just moving around the map. There's not even anything to say about it. They're just moving around the map. The first big interaction is going to be from Soul as he gets that sidelight nair. But at this point, he needs to be very careful about what he does. Phazon needs to be very careful about what he does because any more damage like that is going to lead to the Brent stock.
Yeah, and Soul keeps trying to set themselves up aerially with their spot dodges. Phazon's there for the punish, almost a guaranteed hit with the sword. And even then, Soul just trying to find anything right now, opting play almost exclusively for the entry point, being aerial with these dares, and Phazon is just racking up damage in the process. It's chip damage for Soul, but Akuma still so heavily lit up. All it takes now is a single signature to maybe bring Soul forwards into this tournament. Recovery doesn't connect though. Phazon is trying to set themselves up for the recovery to catch out Soul. They're both playing the same exact game right now, and neither one of which is working. Phazon's there for the end light. Good to keep Soul in the air. Spot dodge is out though. The punish not available. The side air though, keeping Soul off stage. This is it. Soul has to take advantage here, but the recovery goes into the air. Phazon hit with the side air. Off stage now, Soul. The entire ball is in his court, but the recovery return. Phazon brings it game 5.
A max range sider at the center of the map while Phazon is off stage, sealing his own fate as Soul just dashes forward and gets the downlight recovery. I mean, oh my gosh.
Wow. Holy moly. I can't.